We've had two different sets of things we've been looking at this afternoon. First of all, I would perhaps just like to ask on this side the questions of the role of internet and the question of demos. We have heard that it is probably very much more exaggerated in the way we see it than what it has actually been doing, at least in the Middle East up to now. And maybe we should, just for a second, ask the question with Tunisia and Egypt. Because I know we're discussing this at the moment too. Are we seeing the same thing there? But in fact, the real role of what the internet has done there is rather out of scale the way it's being seen here, or is it different to what you would see in the situation in Iran and Iraq? Want to?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. The thing is that developments in Tunisia and Egypt or in Iran are not, something that happened over a period of a few months. I mean, we're talking about developments that have been in place for at least 10, 20 years. Yeah, especially in Egypt. I don't know much about history of Tunisia, but I definitely know in Egypt, from day one when Mubarak came to power, there was opposition. And they've been organizing and organizing and organizing. And even in this last stage, Mubarak wasn't forced out of power just by the force of the people being in Tahrir Square. What really contributed to that last bit was that the workers of the Suez Canal, doctors, lawyers, all these different segments decided to strike. And that really broke back the back of the regime.
So it was the economic factor.
Yes, and all these different groups have been organizing for years. So, just because, although, the sort of the straw that broke the camel's back was apparently this video that was published of that, I think it was a student who burned himself or something. Yeah. You have to always, keep in mind there was lots before that.
Yes.
Is this working? Yeah. Of course, I'm very, very excited and kind of fascinated by what's happening in the Middle East, especially that I lived there most of my life. And to see these events, regardless of the outcome, what will happen in Egypt, I really hope that the outcome will be positive. There will be some kind of obstacles at the beginning, sure. But this brings so much hope to us, to people in the Middle East and in the world as well. But the Middle East especially, it brings hope because this kind of barrier of fear has been broken, and it's become contagious, and you feel that regimes and governments are worried because not that the internet has kind of pushed this or kind of been the motive, but it has indeed facilitated it. So it's like all governments the world is watching. So they have to be accountable, they have to be responsible. And I can't help but just go back to Iraq, in my time living in Iraq, during the Ba'ath regime, where we had an authoritarian regime. Internet was banned, mobile phone was banned, and I can't imagine us voicing any kind of complaints or concerns, not to the outside world, not even to ourselves, not whispering it. But I think, and I keep thinking, if we did have the internet at that time, would something similar might have happened? Would it spared us in Iraq kind of all the occupation and kind of the chaos that followed? So I'm very hopeful. But in Iraq at the moment, I don't see something very similar to what's happening in Tunisia and Egypt. There are some demonstrations about the security situation, to improve the security situation and basic services. However, because there is no better option in Iraq at the moment, there are no contenders. So even the people don't know, so if we have revolution, who will come in? There's no good, strong contender. So it's just all very optimistic and hopeful what's happening, and I just do hope it will continue kind of on a positive path.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. What does this say to China?
I just want to make 2 points. First of all, about Tunisia. It was said that the WikiLeaks stories about the corruption of the first family and so on sort of started the riots, the protests. But I'm sure the people there, they knew about these corrupt activities all along. The question, therefore, is a certain spark brought about a big fire. And that spark probably was an unemployed graduate. He was forced to make a living by working as a hawker. Then his card was confiscated by the police. He was so angry, so frustrated that he burned himself. I mean, the incident drew so much sympathy from the people. So I don't think it's a matter of information and so on, but the level of grievances just gradually built up, so much so that it sparked off tremendous protests. Caroline asked me to talk about China. I think the Chinese authorities have been sophisticated enough, as I was saying, to tackle the issue of unemployment and at least the issue of the social security net. I think they understand that they must not allow this dissatisfaction to build up to such an extent. On the other hand, I would also like to talk about the United States. I'm certainly very unhappy with the double standards here. Mm-hmm. I mean, initially, the Obama administration kept relatively quiet for a while. Then it asked for an orderly transition when the situation became quite unfavorable to Hosni Mubarak. And when the protests quieted down a little bit, then there was talk about the need to have Mubarak around until September because he would be needed for stability and so on. If you believe in democracy, then you have to face the consequences. It appears that the Obama administration and to some extent the Western world was very afraid that, if you really had elections, then the Muslim Brotherhood would come in, then the Middle East would be in trouble, there would be difficulties in Egypt-Israelite relations and so on. And I think this kind of attitude requires certain reflections.
Can I maybe just cut in there? I think the question, we don't want to get into a large debate on foreign policies, which is very complicated. But I think the question of double standards, be it in international relations or, of course, within the states themselves, that we see very often, I'm not talking about China, but we see very often, certainly in Egypt, also in very many of the authoritarian regimes in Africa, that the people see the double standards within their own states, that there is a political elite which is very rich, and the rest are not. So what kind of effect do you think that this transparency movement within the net, maybe I can also turn to this side, do you think that there is also, and I would like to stay with China just a little bit, do you think that if expectations in the economic sector are fairly well looked after, but don't you think that there will also be the wish to be able to move within the internet more freely, and also with the question of double standards, what is transparency? I don't want just to stay on China, but I think it is an important issue if we're looking at the future, which we want to do. How long can this regime just keep placating by saying, well, you have a better living standard, but keeping out the sort of democratic or the question of being able to compare and look at other countries, but also to look at one's own dark areas in one's own regime?
I guess very briefly put, we all have to demonstrate a certain concern, a certain willingness to speak up, and the willingness even to pay the price. Politicians in democracies, and especially in authoritarian regimes like in China, tend to have double standards. They tend to be very hypocritical, and every one of us has a certain responsibility to speak up and expose these double standards and expose this hypocrisy. I mean, this is my...
Okay. May I just ask on this side, with social networks, how do you see, you've been talking about the social and the looking after relationships with people one already knows. What do you see with the question of tying on to, you did give some local examples. Do you think at all that there's going to be, we talked yesterday about this global and the global citizen, which is tied up also maybe to music, but do you think with the networks, are they just going to stay in their own sort of ethnic corners, or do you think we're going to become more cosmopolitan in everyday practice in the social networks?
Well, first of all, I think you have to think about the fact that maybe the half of all the people living on the world, about even maybe more than the half of all the people didn't even know that something like internet is existing. There are just 1.5 billion people who have access to the internet, and there are over 75% of all people who have of all people living on the world who have no access to the internet. So at the moment we are really at the beginning of this this movement, and here in Europe and in the United States and so on, it need just 15 years to for the internet to come to home and to get it as a useful tool for political discussion. But in other countries like in Asia or in Africa and so on, I think we maybe need next 50 years to implement internet as a tool for political communication. So it's a long way and it's a long distance to a target where you can say it's a good tool for global communication on politics.
I'll go on to you in a second, but can I just a second question? And we do have data that tells us that people, if we look at the people who are using the net, and we did talk about this already, that most are not really interested in political conversations. They're interested in doing all sorts of other things, which is maybe one of the points where you could also ask China if they're non-rightly, they're too afraid of the internet because people are not using it for political conversations usually in any case. So what do you think? Is that going to change consciousness for political?
But I'm not sure whether most people who are reading newspaper are interested in politics or more interested in the sport pages.
Sure,
I think it's no special internet topic, but even more a media topic and how important is politics for people and how they reflect on it. Now in Egypt or in Tunisia and so on, or in Iran, it is and it was very important to reflect these topics. In Germany, it's maybe not so important because most people like living here, and the reflection about politics are not such deep than in other countries.
Yeah, Birgit.
I just would like to mention one aspect that through internet we get today in the Western world much easier access to information about what happened in other parts of the world. So maybe that we have not to look how internet is changing some social movements in Africa or Asia or South America or wherever in the world, but how the information we get through internet comes to the Western world, and this is changing our society. Yeah. I think this is more, we have not always to have this colonial attitude, even in the internet. We have to look on equal level to each other, and then we have to learn from others, and we have the opportunity to use the technology to get more information for us about others.
Yes, I think we should look at politics in a very broad sense. It's not about American foreign policy, about Chinese leadership. Very often it's just community politics, things that are happening around us. And this is quite the situation in many modern Asian cities, like cities in Japan, Hong Kong, and so on, that somehow a lot of the young people are not too interested in national politics, but they are very interested in small issues that are happening around them, like conservation projects, like minor issues of social injustice, and so on. And they get a lot of satisfaction through participation. And I think this is important. The whole idea is that getting involved, being able to do a little bit, and they get a lot of satisfaction from these activities. And I think this is what they mean by politics. Politics in the daily life sense, not something very distant from them.
I think that has been fairly well established now that that indeed the local has been strengthened, and not so much the cosmopolitan. May I ask, do you have other comments to one another or questions which you would like to ask each other before I involve our public? Yes.
I would like to add to all these discussions we saw today, or we listened today, that I think it's a very important issue to think how we get the oral society into the system of digitalized world. Mm-hmm. Because we discussed a lot of aspects inside of the digital world, but if we know that more than the half of the world is outside and oral and not digitalized, then we have to think how we can develop this relationship.
Yes, I think digital divide is a very large issue, and we tend to think, because of the kind of statistics we look at here, we do forget that it is still a technical problem in many areas of the world. It's not just what we do when we get into the net. You're quite right. Any other comments on the floor here? In that case, I would very much like to involve our public. I shall keep speaking in English. You are able to ask questions in German. I think have you all got your headphones? And we shall then answer probably then in English. So can I ask for questions from the audience? Questions or comments? It's been a long day. Yes, Richard Harknett. Wait for otherwise we can't translate.
Danke. Just to pick up on this theme about the local or the community being reinforced, whether it's in music or in politics, and we sort of took a negative look at that this morning, but if you could talk a bit more about sort of the positive context of, the local anew, it seems, when we think about globalization, and we saw it as a threat to the local. But in fact, we have, it seems, through this technology, a localism anew. And what does that sort of mean, whether we're thinking about it in political terms, in social network terms, or in cultural terms?
I guess it's just satisfaction in life. In East Asia, broadly, we certainly see that in the recent decade or so, there are less upward social mobility opportunities. People of my generation, I'm 61 years old, people of my generation in East Asia tended to believe that if you work very hard, you could make enough money to improve your living and so on. Gradually, my children, they don't exactly believe in that. And they are looking for new types of satisfaction, new types of satisfaction in daily life. And I think the internet, social networking, community politics, and so on, mutual help, even just talking to each other, communicating with each other, become a very important source of satisfaction in life. And at least in East Asia, where living standards or economic development increasingly reaches a plateau, and people are looking for new forms and new ways of getting satisfaction in life.
Would anyone else like to comment?
First of all, using a social network is helping you reflecting yourself. You're filling out a profile and uploading pictures of yourself and so on. So it's you think about yourself, and a lot of users of social network likes this thinking about itself, and that's one very important function of it, I think. And
is that critical reflection, or are we becoming more egoistic?
Yes, of course it's critical reflection, because you, if you fill in your profile, you really like to be nice to the other persons who are looking at your profile. You want to have an
authentic profiles.
Not always, but it's a mixture between authentic and wishes to my own person. Because is it just wishes to your person or not authentic? Your friends will write you a message and say, "Hey, that's not realistic. You are just an idiot. Why don't you write the right things in your profile?" And so it's of course, in critical reflecting with yourself and the one person you like to be and the one you really are. And so I think this is an important function of social networks. And another function is that it's easy to identify with other persons, because you see the other profiles and how these persons show themselves to the community and so on. And so that's a very emotional situation, because you see the differences and the comments between people.
Yes, Mina.
May I just add to that? That I think one of the main things that strikes me, is this working? Okay. One of the main things that strikes me, that has struck me about...
Can you put the mic up to... I don't know, is it on? Is the mic working?
Is it working? Closer. Okay.
Thank you.
So one of the things that has struck me about Facebook in particular is the cultural kind of the cultural leap that it has managed to create, which people don't. A lot of people here in the West don't recognize and don't talk about. And it might be very simple here, which are the photos, the uploading of photos, especially by females, especially photos in which females are kind of dressed up or kind of wearing very liberal or Western clothes. And I know people who are familiar with the Middle East, with Muslim countries, maybe you are, Kuros, or if you've lived there, you would know that a photo is an extreme taboo. A photo of a female to be given to someone, for example, to her boyfriend or to a male acquaintance, is a taboo. No one would do that. And now all of a sudden with Facebook, we have this, this taboo, this tradition being broken. And I have, most of my friends on Facebook are from Iraq or are Muslims. And they have photos of themselves on the beach, etc., where they also have many other friends viewing them. And I remember that my husband at the time, when I uploaded my photo on Facebook, which is a decent photo, he was kind of questioning how I could dare kind of upload a photo where many of my friends would see acquaintances. Well, I say friends, some of them are barely acquaintances. And kind of he came up with the argument is, would you give your photo to, and of course in our society it's a big deal, would you give your photo, just a photograph, to your acquaintances? And I know I had to say no, but I didn't know. And then he said, so how different is this? How different is Facebook, especially that other people can download your photo and use it? Not that this is what we think people do all the time, but people have access to it. So when you look at it, this is a huge shift, a huge change, and I always want me to write about this kind of shift. So I was wondering if we could kind of cross barriers that quickly. Could it be done more positively with other issues? Could we start debates, for example, through social networking sites on taboo issues? For example, religion, which I'm very kind of big on, we should start questioning. We should start kind of debates on religion, which no one starts in Muslim countries. It's always kind of it's somewhere you never go to. So I was wondering, is that a potential to go further?
I think you're getting on to a very important subject, one which we at SAC also very often talk about, question of cross-cultural competence, and I think, and communication, of course. I think it's a very big issue because we're talking about globalization and the global of the net. But I don't think we really realize what kind of issues are concerned when we get into that. From the photos to the way we talk to each other in the net. We think we're talking about the same thing. Often we don't even know the sort of day-to-day information. We would have to maybe background information. We would have to know to make a judgment on whatever we are talking about. We certainly don't know about the historical, cultural aspects which are conditioning the way we see things and the way we read things. So I think this is a huge issue and very much underestimated in the net. We don't know, correct me if someone knows better, but I don't know if there is research to a great extent being done on what kind of destructive things we are doing in the net without meaning to. I was on at this at a different level before. What is unintendedly being done, which is maybe being harmful to international, intercultural relationships, because we don't realize it. We're not conscious of the fact that we're doing this kind of thing. Maybe I could ask you to comment just on what Mina was saying, because I think we just don't have the consciousness for this.
Well, Iran is a bit more, I would say, liberal when it comes to that kind of thing. But still, yeah, I mean, there is a barrier to disclosing anything of yourself in the internet. I mean, generally speaking, Western societies, I think they define themselves. You're not honest unless you put everything out in the open. That's how a Westerner thinks. It goes right down to some issues like nudity. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you will never have this kind of attitude in at least in the Middle East. Like, in fact, in the Middle East, it's rather rude to voice your opinion on many things quite openly. It's just simply rude. It's not a dishonest thing not to say it, right? So you're supposed to know better. You're already supposed to know what the other person thinks, yes, in certain situations. So, on Facebook and all these social networkings, actually, they assume that you want to put things out into the world, and but that's the wrong assumption.
I think these things certainly will change, but I was just thinking, of course, even in the pre-internet days, in the UK, where I was born and brought up, we didn't talk about politics, we didn't talk about religion, we didn't talk about sex, and we didn't talk about money. So that's why the British always talk about the weather. But, okay, get back to more serious subjects. But I think these things are changing, but it's a process, and we don't know how long that is going to take in different cultures and in different parts of the world. And I think getting back to the critical point of the critical role, the critical function which can be an internet, is of course we don't want to support cultural relativism. I think we are dynamic. We are dynamic societies, but at the same time, one of the questions was, of course, UNESCO. We do want to support and keep the huge variety of cultural heritage. So it's a very sort of a very complex kind of way we are going. What are we destroying? What do we not want to destroy? We certainly want to save. Would you like to comment maybe on that? It's difficult.
Yes, this is a question which has to be negotiated between the societies all around the world, and between the technological part of the society and the non-technology part of the society. And I have not a final answer, but as I'm part of the UNESCO too, I believe that we have to follow up this question and not just to leave it just in the hands of the commercial aspects the internet is bringing along.
I think maybe that's quite a good point to stop on and say, unless I see any urgent questions, but where I see. There's another question. 2 questions, right? Okay. One back here.
Considering the massive growth of members in social networks, I can imagine that people can feel an urge to join such networks. And in the past it was, do you understand me? In the past that people tried to hide information, and now there's a pressure to publish information.
Okay. Sorry, did you? I wasn't hearing too well, so maybe I don't know if the question was understood here.
Okay. Considering the massive growth of social network members, I can imagine that in the future people feel an urge to publish the information, join the network. In the past it was the other trend, to hide information. What do you think?
Okay.
Mr. Groscher?
Well, I don't think that there's a social pressure to post private information about yourself, but maybe there's a social need to use a social network, like that the need to use a telephone or to have a post box or an email box and so on, because it's part of the common communication in our society. But I think you just need this tool of communications and the tool to communicate, but you just do not need to public private information of yourself if you don't feel comfortable with this.
So I think it's a question that's being asked here is it becoming a cultural standard? So that our Google generation is going to do that with so automatically?
I think it's a communication standard, but it must be a cultural standard for everyone.
Yeah, okay.
No, I do find that there is kind of social pressure, especially on Facebook, so you see your friend has gone on vacation to the Caribbean, and you feel a pressure to also be kind of someone who's also going out to see the world, who is enjoying vacation, or you are also someone who is taking part in very exciting and interesting things so that your life doesn't seem dull compared to your peers. So there is this social pressure of uploading your photos of all the great places you've been to, all the great things you've done and seen and eaten. And there's also the kind of, I forgot what I was just going to say. But yeah, it's just that, I mean, I feel kind of from the surroundings, from the friends I have, from kind of being on Facebook for a few years now, I do feel that pressure. And for me, it has put me off, because I don't know if you remember of you who started with the early days of Facebook, because I was a student at the University of Manchester at the time, and it had just started. And it was such a great tool because it was controllable, it was limited, you had a certain number of friends, and it was new. But then now I find that I have friends that I kind of was too embarrassed to turn down because I know their parents, ironically. So very kind of kids, teenagers, whom I've kind of was embarrassed and kind of had to add on Facebook. And I really feel like dropping out of Facebook because too much information, too many photos. I have to admit, sometimes you want to stay on Facebook and kind of see what other people are doing, but I don't have the urge to kind of post, to do anything, to update. I'm just there because, of course, what I focus on is social media, so I really have to be in touch with social media to be able to look at it or analyze it. Yeah. But it has really put me off, this kind of social pressure, this kind of it's just really off-putting.
But there is a certain distinction between virtual reality and reality. We do find a social problem now that a lot of young people, most of them are young people, that they find it so much at ease to communicate through the internet that they have gradually lost the skills to actually communicate with people. And we do have young people, again mostly, who stay in their rooms all the time. So much so that their parents have to send meals to their rooms and so on. They just have lost the skills of actual communications, being so totally absorbed in the virtual reality of the internet.
I just remembered the point that I forgot to mention, is that in some cases, Facebook has been kind of a way to authenticate, is it authenticize, what your status, what you do, your marital status. A friend of mine simply didn't post that she got engaged, now she's married. She didn't change that status on Facebook. And when someone knew that she was married and he posted something and some congratulations, everyone was furious because they were asking, how could you be married? It's not on Facebook. And it happens all the time. How could you be working for this institution or that? It's not on Facebook, as if now Facebook is the way to kind of prove to the world that you are doing this is your status. So it's just amazing how it's kind of working.
Very two-sided story. A last question, and then we're going to come to an end.
Weniger eine Frage als eine Nachdenkungsanregung. Früher, vor der Zeit Radio und was danach kam, wird das gleich detaillieren, war das Haus, die Wohnung, das kam, waren sie abgeschlossen, da waren sie für sich, die Außenwelt war weg. Durch das Fernsehen kam die Außenwelt zu Innereien und die Domäne Haus wurde gesprengt. Jetzt passiert das Umgekehrte, dass der Betreffende im Haus ist, auch diese Tabuisierung, die gebrochen wurde durch das Fernsehen, jetzt nach außen trägt. Er springt jetzt sozusagen aus dem Abgeschlossenen heraus in das Äußere. Mit der Problematik, dass unter Umständen nicht abgeschaltet werden kann. Wie beim Fernsehen können Sie dazu machen. Aber an der Struktur, dass durch das Fernsehen das Haus gesprengt wird, die Domäne des Abgeschlossenseins, ändert das nichts. Und genauso ist es umgekehrt. Es dringt nach außen. Dies bedeutet eine neue Nachdenkung, was dadurch sich ereignet, längerfristig, wie das alles sich entwickelt. Nicht, das ist detailliert, sagen, die Sie geschildert haben. Sie haben das angesprochen, der Kollege aus China, dass eben der Mensch nach außen geht und genau das findet jetzt statt. Das ist ein Tabubruch, der jetzt zeitverzögert, Fernsehen, bla bla, jetzt brauche ich wiederholen, jetzt stattfindet. Eine Nachdenkung für weitere Tagungen. Danke.
Herzlichen Dank für die Anregung. Ich glaube, wir werden es einfach so stehen lassen, denn ich glaube, wir sind alle... sorry, I'll speak in English again. You don't need your thing. I'll speak in English, sorry. I think we'll just leave the statement as it was, and thank you for new ideas, for new conversations another time. I think we've had a long day today, and I don't want to come to any real kind of wrap-up, apart from saying I think we want to raise awareness, we want to think about responsibility, responsible connectivity. And I think certainly if it's going to help us on the way to global understanding, then that is something which we want to support. And at the same time, we know that there are many, many reasons why we should very, very carefully be watching what is happening in and with internet and the social media. And that's the thing we are going to be looking at tomorrow at 11 o'clock. The panel discussion with the question Internet Quo Vadis, again international and with a professional moderator. And in the afternoon we shall be looking at the question of freedom and cyber war and regulation of the net.